My name is Beste İşleyen. I'm a senior lecturer in politics at the University of Amsterdam. And I'm really excited today to welcome 5 distinguished speakers to discuss this very important and timely topic. Before introducing our speakers, I would like to thank the organizers of this event. First of all, a big thank you to the Istituto Affari Internazionali in Rome for organizing this with the Jean Monnet Network EUMENIA. Special thanks to Dr. Daniela Huber and Nathalie Champignon. And this webinar is part of the outreach activities of EUMENIA, which is a Jean Monnet network co-funded by the Erasmus Plus program of the European Union for a duration of 3 years, starting from 2018. It is led by Dr. Dimitris Bouris, who is a colleague of mine at the University of Amsterdam in the politics department. And this Jean Monnet network encompasses 7 other institutions, including the University of Peloponnese, Greece, Istituto Affari Internazionali, Italy, Roskilde University in Denmark, Birzeit University in Palestine, Yashar University in Turkey, American University of Beirut in Lebanon, and the University of Jordan in Jordan. So let me specify the 3 interlinked objectives of the EUMENIA Jean Monnet network, which follows a bottom-up approach. First, it aims to bring scholars into different classrooms of European and Middle Eastern universities, thus fostering exchanges between students and academics. Secondly, it aims to facilitate cooperation with civil society stakeholders. And thirdly, it aims to engage with national and EU policymakers through public events and online platforms, which contribute to the dissemination of this knowledge and deepen our understanding of this complex relationship. So after this introduction, let me introduce our distinguished speakers today. I am very happy and honored to introduce Ambassador Angelina Eichhorst, from the European External Action Service of the European Union. Thanks for being with us, Ambassador Eichhorst, who is Managing Director for Western Europe, Western Balkans, Turkey, and United Kingdom. Ambassador has taken up her position as Managing Director in June 2020, and previously she also held several positions within the European Union. She, for example, served within the EU at DGs IB, RELEX, and DEVCO in Brussels, Jordan, Syria, and in Lebanon, where she was ambassador and head of delegation from 2011 and 2015. And after the introductory remarks, we will move to our 3 speakers. Our first speaker is Laura Batalla Adam, who has worked in the European Parliament for nearly a decade now, advising members on a wide range of issues. She has established her own initiatives like the Turkey-EU Forum, which is a cross-party, non-partisan platform for high-level discussions and cooperation between Turkey and the EU, of which she is Secretary General since 2014. Ms. Batalla is part of several expert groups like Mercator's Turkey-Europe Feature Forum and a member of distinguished leadership networks such as the Marshall Memorial Fellowship of German Marshall Fund of the United States. And I'm also really happy to welcome today Dr. Ioannis Grigoriadis, who is an associate professor and Jean Monnet Chair of European Studies at the Department of Political Science and Public Administration at Bilkent University in Ankara. And he is also senior fellow and head of the program on Turkey at the Hellenic Foundation for European and Foreign Policy. His research interests include comparative, European, and Turkish history and politics. And I'm again very excited to welcome today Professor Meltem Müftüler-Baç, who is currently Dean of Faculty of Arts and Social Sciences, Professor of International Relations, and Jean Monnet Chair of ad personam at Sabanci University in Istanbul. So I cannot do justice to her enormous contribution to Turkey-EU studies. She has published numerous monographs and articles on Turkey-EU relations, EU enlargement, Turkish foreign policy, and Turkish politics. And her work has been supported by various EU research programs, including 2 Horizon 2020 projects, and also under the preceding framework programs. And in 2011, Professor Müftüler-Baç received a Jean Monnet Network Chair of Excellence from the European Commission. and she is also recipient of many important prizes in Turkey. And after the discussion, Dr. Luca Franza will take over with some questions and discussion points. So Dr. Franza is head of the Energy, Climate and Resources program at the Istituto Affari Internazionali. He is also an associate fellow at the Klingendal International Energy Program in The Hague, and a lecturer in the Energy Master of the Paris School of International Affairs at Sciences Po. And he has widely published on geopolitics of energy, European energy security, and European energy relations with the Southern Mediterranean. So I will first give the floor to Ambassador Eichhorst for the opening remarks, and then I will move to Ms. Batalla on the current state of play in Turkey-EU relations in the light of current crisis, as well as retrospectively. And I will also ask you how it's seen from Brussels, including the way forward. And following that, I will invite Dr. Grigoriadis and Professor Müftüler-Baç to offer their perspectives. And Dr. Franza then will offer some discussion points and raise some questions. So each speaker will have for about 10 minutes, with Dr. Franza having about 7 minutes, and then we will have room for questions and further discussion with the audience. And you can send us your question using the chat box. Ambassador Eichhorst, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Beste, and all friends. I hope you can hear me well. Hope the sound is good. I heard you very well. I'm really happy to be with so many friends. And although we don't see each other, I hope we will have a good discussion. As you know, I cannot, unfortunately, I cannot stay for very, very long. But what I want to say up front, if there are any questions from the audience, the students, others, you can always contact us via email and we can get back to this, because I find it extremely important that we have this exchange. I wanted to give you a little flavor from where we are now in Brussels in terms of EU-Turkey relationships. It's really this question, the big question of how can we stay on track, or perhaps even better to say, get back to the track. That keeps us very, very busy here at the External Action Service in Brussels under the leadership of High Representative Borrell, but also in the Council with all the member states, in the Commission and in the European Parliament, because as we speak, you may know, but there is a vote, there is a debate, was this morning, but there is a vote underway on a resolution on Varosha. At the European Parliament. And frankly, we have on a daily basis a lot of questions, a lot of matters we have to handle with this. So what you do as a policymaker, you obviously, you try to see what is the real right diagnosis here in order to get the real answer, the right cure in a sense. And it's quite deep. It's a very complex, I hate the word dossier, but I would still use it, because we are talking about real people here. We have a long-standing, deep relationship, the European Union and Turkey, a vast relationship. There is no country in the world we have, as the European Union, deployed so many instruments, so many sectors we work with. It's the biggest, the fifth largest trading partner. I wanted to say the biggest delegation we have of the European Union. You know, we don't have embassies, we call them delegations, but our office in Ankara is the largest office worldwide. And that shows how deep the relation is. I will not go to the history, but I think it is important to always keep that in mind, and that we somehow moved from a very large and deep relationship into a situation today where all the work of the institutions is focused on de-escalation. We are almost in a crisis situation. We have landed there to obviously not to the liking of any of us. This is the last thing we as diplomats, but again, I don't want to talk about institutions per se, because we're talking here about people and what really could be out there for the people in Turkey and the people in the European Union in terms of a good relationship. We tried at the beginning of this year in March, this is maybe my starter, to have again a reinvigoration, a re-energizing of the relationship with Turkey. You know, it went downwards from 2016, 17, 18. Here we are today in trying to see what can we do to keep the different elements still in place. And we haven't been very successful between March and today. For a number of reasons, and I'm sure the other speakers will go into this more in detail. But I would like you to look again at the conclusions taken by the leaders on the 1st of October, the European Council conclusions on the Eastern Mediterranean. And read it with an academic eye. I mean, you can look at it politically and policy-making wise, but also look at the issues that were really highlighted there as crucial for the moment to work on. 4 tracks. It is the relations between Greece and Turkey. Second, the relations Cyprus and Turkey, and rather, if you like, the Cyprus settlement work that needs to be done. Thirdly, the relations European Union, Turkey, so as a whole, as us as an entity, but you could unpack that and also look at the bilateral relation of every member state with Turkey. And fourthly is the mandate given to the High Representative, Mr. Borrell, to look at the modalities of a possible Eastern Mediterranean conference. This also keeps us very busy. Huh? So all tracks, I call it tracks because in diplomacy, obviously, we want to see that the channels are open and work, that people meet, that they sit around the table, discuss the issues, and try to find solutions. This is essential. And it's essential to see that each of those tracks get traction, so to say, at least before the next European Council, when all the leaders come together again. And as you know, this is on the 10th of December. This is tomorrow. and many of us today have in our 24/7 work, what we're trying to do in terms of passing the messages, discussing, trying to avoid actions which irritate, unilateral actions, other actions that actually could make us sink deeper, so to say. All of that is to try to come to a possible light still on the 10th of December that gives leaders at the European Union, leaders level, the oxygen to say, okay, we can perhaps not reset the full relationship, but at least we can continue to work towards a recommitment of all the commitments we took in the past with Turkey. This is very important to try to get there. It's quite tedious. It's a bumpy road, as we say. And it's true that on the Turkey side, there are a number of issues they would like to see addressed by the European Union, and likewise the same on the EU side. You know, and again, I could speak for you to you for 3 hours on this, but I will not take the time of the other speakers. But the point is here, strategically, the relation between European Union and Turkey is of such vast importance that we need to continue to we need to continue to use the tracks available until we may get to a point of exhaustion, but we have not, I always say that the diplomacy track has not been exhausted as yet. We still need to work together to try to find the solutions, but it needs to come from both sides. So both, in very abstract terms, both EU and Turkey, for all the reasons we know. Will that be possible before the 10th of December? I can't tell you. We get different signals at different points in time. What we need is predictability. What we need is the rebuilding of trust between the two entities. Turkey is not only a strategically important partner, it's a vast entity. It is a NATO member. It's a strong partner as well. It's our neighbor. Turkey is our neighbor. And still, on paper, Turkey is a candidate country. And there, of course, we say, if the leadership of Turkey aspires to become member of the European Union, then there are a set of rules, and we all know them, which have to be followed and have to be worked through domestically where we have a lot of questions, of course, on what's happening currently in the domestic scene as such, particularly for a country that knows the Copenhagen criteria and everything that is needed domestically, but also in terms of your immediate neighbors. Turkey used to have, it was called the zero conflict policy, you remember, with the neighbors. I was, at the time I was serving in the region, I was serving in Syria and Lebanon, but we were all very much hoping to work together to aspire to that zero conflict policy. So regionally is very important. And obviously, broader than the region is with the whole EU. I'm not going with you in any kind of blame game here. What I'm trying to project is that we feel very strongly we need to continue to make the efforts. This is wherever I'm asked to speak and asked to come in, to continue to make the efforts to show that we can find joint arrangements based on joint interest, and we can work together instead of, for one reason or the other, against each other. This is the message I'm trying to project also to you here, and I'm very happily challenged on that by the audience, but I want to stop here from now and I'll listen to you further. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Eichhorst, for this very comprehensive overview of the situation, seen also from the European side. We know that you will be leaving after half an hour. I already see that there are some questions coming to you, but unfortunately, given time constraints, I cannot start with the Q&A right now. But my suggestion would be that we save these questions and maybe find a way to refer these questions to you. But thank you for being with us today. Now I would like to give the floor to Ms. Batalla Adam to share her perspectives.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure to be here with all of you today. So now it's working. Yes, I see there's a lot of interest in the question. I'm just trying to, it's an unusual sunny day in Brussels, so I'm trying to be as far away as I can from the sun, so I might be moving while I talk. I just wanted to say to start with that I won't be here representing the views of any members of the European Parliament that I work for. I will be speaking in my personal capacity. As was explained before, the EU-Turkey Forum is a cross-party, bipartisan group of members of the European Parliament that was established already 10 years ago, and it's one of the longest friendship group in the European Parliament that has resisted all the ups and downs in our relations, and that we are trying at the moment to still constructively address the major issues in our relations with Turkey. But I wanted to provide maybe a bit more background, not going back too far in history about our relations, but just to understand a bit how we came to the point where we are at the moment. I think Ambassador Eichhorst explained very well where we are at present and what is at stake in the coming days in the run-up to the Council that will take place in December. But even if we may be at a historical low point in our relations, maybe it's not the lowest. It can get even lower, to be frank. And we've been in this current climate of relations already for some years. And I would say approximately since 2014, we have been seeing how...
Sorry, I think someone has unmuted themselves. Can you please mute yourself?
Yes, now it is.
Sorry. Yes, Laura.
No problem. So if we have a look, for instance, at the Commission reports on a yearly basis on the progress of Turkey towards accession, towards the membership, we see since 2014, for instance, how Turkey has been distancing itself further and further from the EU values and the Copenhagen criteria. This has been even more critical in the last 2 years, 2019, 18 and 19. And this is where we also see, for instance, in June 2019, how the Council conclusions asked or recommended the member states not to open any new negotiation chapters in the accession talks or to close any of them, and also to put on a hold the negotiations on the modernization of the customs union. So since then, things have even gotten worse. Last year, the European Parliament adopted a very strong resolution in which it called on the Commission and the member states to formally suspend accession talks with Turkey. And at the moment, as we talk, the new report is being prepared by Nacho Sanchez Amor, the new rapporteur on Turkey, which will be presented actually next week in the European Parliament. And we will see where the European Parliament stands at the moment with regards to this question. There are ongoing discussions, both academically, but also in the practitioner world, about the need to maybe rethink the relationship, even if we have an accession framework, which might not be working at the moment. Some advocates claim that it should continue to be there because it's the only powerful tool that we have to have a normative pressure on Turkey. So it continues to be committed to the democratization process. But there are other harsher views advocating for a complete review of this framework and to explore new models. Here, of course, my personal opinion is that even if it's frozen and it's not going anywhere at the moment, it's important to continue the prospect of membership alive. And in the meantime, try to see what is realistic in terms of advancing in our common interest with Turkey. But of course, in reviewing how things have been going on in the past 15 years since accession talks were open, I think we should also ask ourselves, both practitioners, politicians, the two sides in general, why it hasn't worked. And here, I mean, it's not to enter into a blame game, but of course there are two sides, and the accession talks were frozen since the very beginning, to say the truth. So we might have ended up where we are because actually the accession process never actually worked. So this is some food for thought as well to take into consideration. The problem is, of course, that now in the light of current events, this relationship has been evolving, and the relationship has changed, actually, especially, I would say, after the so-called the EU-Turkey statement on migration. This has transformed the relationship that we have with Turkey at the moment with a more transactional approach. But the reality is that even transactional relations are strained, to be honest, so they are not even working. So we have to find a way to make this work in a more realistic way and to make it function as good as possible. And one reality that we might see, I mean, one of the reasons why Turkey has been distancing itself from the EU's values has been because of its regression on the areas of rule of law and fundamental rights. And now we see added to that the attitude or the new autonomous and unilateral position of its foreign policy. So I think this gives us a reason to maybe explore, to decompartmentalize the way in which we deal with Turkey. I mean, we cannot, in an isolated fashion, talk to Turkey on certain aspects, being the Eastern Mediterranean now, or the Cyprus settlement issue, or Nagorno-Karabakh, or other wider Middle East conflicts. We have to engage in an open discussion with Turkey in all these issues in a comprehensive manner. So maybe this is a way to overcome some of the frustrations and also the points in which we haven't been agreeing. I think the next Council Summit will be a very important one. It will not be a make or break one. I think we are not gonna be facing the end of our relations with Turkey. Neither side can afford that, to be honest. So we will see what will come out of it. But it's interesting as well to see how the different member states are positioned within this debate. So we see that paradoxically, the EU, even if it needs to contribute to find a resolution to this conflict, cannot mediate, but because it's kind of a party to this, to the current tensions in the Eastern Mediterranean. And we see different blocks of member states being featuring in the discussion, with France being probably the country that is more at odds with Turkey over several different aspects. I mean, it can be the Eastern Mediterranean, but not only, also Libya, also Islam, we've seen recently, and others on the other side, like Germany trying to adopt a more conciliatory role to bring closer the two sides. So I think unless, I mean, what may happen here, we are still facing, of course, the prospect of possible sanctions. Targeted sanctions have been already imposed to individual members in Turkey, but we might be, I mean, the Council already said we are open to use all our tools at our disposal if we don't see a change of attitude when it comes to the Turkish position on this issue. So it's there, this possibility is out there, and unless the Turkey changes course over the actions in the region, we may see, I mean, sanctions being imposed. But at the same time, and I will end with that, the Council and its member states have made a very interesting offer to Turkey, putting on the table a renewed positive agenda in which we could make progress on certain areas. I mean, while this is something that we surely need to welcome, we also need to be aware that we, in the light of this blocked accession process, this positive agenda may not bring all the necessary leverage on Turkey that we are seeking at the moment, because all these questions that we put on the table, the modernization of the customs union, people-to-people contacts, migration, have already been on the table for quite some time. And progress has not been possible because none of this can be materialized without an improvement of the human rights and democratic situation in the country. So unfortunately, here, this is where we need to ask as well our Turkish counterparts, and especially in light of the recent statement that was made by the president a few days ago of recommitting to the goal of EU membership and being part of the European Union, whether these reforms can be real. Because unfortunately, unless there's a change in the way rule of law and fundamental rights are conducted in Turkey, we won't be seeing any move, unfortunately, because even the customs union, which France has been calling actually to even suspend the original agreement of 1995, will not move forward, at least in the European Parliament. There will be no will to move them forward unless they see an improvement of the overall democratic situation in Turkey. So I think I exhausted already my 10 minutes. There were a lot of other things I wanted to comment on, but maybe we can leave that for the question and answer session. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much, Ms. Batalla. You have provided us with so much detail and also the way forward by maybe showing us also that there can be concrete consequences in Turkey-EU relations in the coming months and in the coming years by reversing maybe the progress that has been achieved so far in the last few decades. So thank you very much for your input. Now I will move to our speakers who will then provide the Greek perspective and the Turkish perspective respectively. And first I would like to invite Dr. Grigoriadis to offer his perspective on the issue from the Greek point of view.
Thank you very much, Beste, and thanks to Natalie for organizing this event. It's a great pleasure to be with you virtually this afternoon from Ankara. So I've been working on EU-Turkey relations, but I will try now to give a more Greek perspective of how Greece, as an EU member state, as a neighbor of Turkey that has faced a number of disputes over decades, has been looking into this relationship. I think it is very important to highlight that Turkey's EU membership perspective became possible when the Greek government in the late 1990s identified Turkey's Europeanization as a very positive development for Greek-Turkish relations as well. Because the hope back then was to introduce a common normative framework that could pave the way for the resolution of the bilateral disputes. Of course, the two sides would disagree on issues of the delineation of their maritime zones in the Aegean and the Eastern Mediterranean. There is, of course, the Cyprus question, which is not a bilateral question, but has a very heavy impact on the two, on the relations of the two countries. So in that respect, in the good old days of EU-Turkey relations, there was a hope for a virtuous circle, whereby relations would improve and courageous steps would be made in order to deliver the results. Unfortunately, we missed a great opportunity in 2004 on both fronts, and this is not very well known. It's of course, the failure of the Annan Plan, and there is a big responsibility of the Greek Cypriot government, the Republic of Cyprus government back then, for failing to understand the historic opportunity that was there on the table. There was another failure to refer the cases of the disputes between Greece and Turkey on the maritime zones to the International Court of Justice in December 2004, when Greece could have pushed this term on the table, and it is very likely that Turkey would have accepted this condition because of the high ambition and the high hope for accession negotiations that would follow very soon. Of course, things have changed a lot ever since. And I would try to highlight now how we've come to a very unfortunate situation whereby we see escalation and sort of a threat of a military confrontation between Greece and Turkey in the Eastern Mediterranean. There are a number of issues, of course. As Laura said before to me, the accession process is in coma, like it's like virtually dead. It's not officially dead. It's legally present, but not in political terms. And this is due both to EU's new approach on, or at least several important countries in the European Union on Turkey's full membership or the future status of Turkey with the European Union. Of course, Turkey has changed track a lot. And this is not just about fulfilling the Copenhagen criteria and the rule of law and the sort of the state of democracy and human rights in the country. It's also about a new strategic ambition that Turkey doesn't need the EU. Turkey can be successful and influential without the European Union. So it's in a sense, it's the argument that Turkey doesn't need the European Union anymore. Actually, the European Union needs Turkey more than the opposite. So this ambition has been facilitated by an assumption that the West, and I add the European Union to this, and the United States is retreating from the neighborhood of Turkey, and Turkey felt that it had the opportunity to project its influence and its force in its neighborhood within a number of different modalities. It could have been in the previous days, like in the previous years, through a stronger economic influence. We're experiencing in the last couple of years a more militaristic sort of understanding of this ambition to play a role in the Syrian civil war, in the Libyan civil war, in Nagorno-Karabakh, and of course now in the Eastern Mediterranean and Cyprus as well. Why is this the case? Why have things changed to the negative? I think there are a number of reasons. Unfortunately, the Cyprus problem is still generating tension. We missed a great opportunity 3 years ago in Crans-Montana, where we came very close to a solution, and we didn't get there. And as a derivative of the Cyprus problem, we're witnessing a sort of a spillover of the conflict in the Eastern Mediterranean towards the Greek-Turkish borders. How this is happening? Of course, this is linked to the fact that the Republic of Cyprus is internationally recognized a member of the European Union, but the Turkish Cypriots are not present in its government. And this gives Turkey an argument to claim that the Republic of Cyprus is not legitimate in pursuing energy exploration without having the Turkish Cypriots on board. But on the other hand, Turkey makes its own claims that very often lie in contradiction with what the international law of the sea says. For example, Turkey's position that islands do not have continental shelf or islands do not have exclusive economic zone is not accepted by the vast majority of countries around the world. So in that respect, I do think that finding a solution or de-escalating the conflict first and then trying to look into a solution, it has to be linked to this, trying to avoid unilateral acts And what happened in Varosha last week, for example, is something that heavily affects the climate to the negative on the Cyprus issue. Turkey is drilling or exploration operations in areas which are disputed by Greece and Turkey are also putting a lot of pressure on the Greek government that thinks that it has to respond. Otherwise, Greek sovereign rights would be claimed, would be sort of challenged. So in that respect, I think what is very important is to agree to avoid unilateral acts and develop a framework whereby the disputes would be discussed in a diplomatic manner. There was a very long and protracted negotiation round series between Greece and Turkey on the issues of the maritime zones that was suspended a couple of years ago. And it would be a great idea for it to be resumed. And this is one of the most important issues on the table right now. And of course, if these rounds fail to deliver a result, there's always the chance of adjudication to the International Court of Justice, which was, as I said in the beginning of my presentation, the original idea that even if countries don't agree on their positions, they can at least agree to accept the court decision, which is, let's say, the European way of resolving disputes. It's not by threatening force or sort of like the use of violence. So I think this is very important right now, as we have witnessed a very dangerous couple of months in the Eastern Mediterranean, avoiding unilateral acts on all sides and developing a framework first for the resolution of the maritime disputes via talks or via adjudication with the International Court of Justice. And of course, this has to be on the basis of the rule of law, which is an important issue. And I think it's important both on domestic Turkish politics and international relations of Turkey. So Greece will never accept that islands don't have a continental shelf before going to it. This is something that the international law has decided. The effect of some islands may be discussed on a case-to-case basis. That's another issue, but the principle has to be there. And the other very important issue, and I agree with the questions raised, is that there is urgent need to resume the Cyprus peace talks. And in that respect, there is an acquis that was accumulated 3 years ago in Crown Montana, Switzerland. It is not the most appropriate political environment, maybe, given the developments on all sides, with the exception of Greece, in my opinion, because I do think that the Greek government would be interested in a quick resolution of the Cyprus issue. But the elections in the north of Cyprus, or the attitude of the Republic of Cyprus government, or the statements by Turkey in recent weeks, and that we're not interested in a federal solution anymore, but we focus on a two-state solution, or the Varosha visit, are not promising. But nevertheless, I think the European Union should put all of its efforts in the resumption of on the peace talks and the quick conclusion of them alongside what the UN Secretary General had suggested, which is called the Guterres framework or the Guterres package. So I think that would be a very sound way to deal with a crisis that may be imminent. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grigoriadis. Yeah, we see that the matter is much more complicated. It has a wide geographical focus, which involves different policy areas. So I thank you for your intervention. And there is indeed a question by one of our students about the elections in Northern Cyprus, and maybe we can get back to it in our Q&A. Now I'm moving to Professor Meltem Müftüler-Baç for her contribution. The floor is yours.
Okay. Thank you, Beste. Thanks a lot for this invitation. I was unfortunately not part of the network, but it's, I've been following that. I'll try to be more focused on the EastMed aspect, because that's more or less what I was asked to do, and leave the Turkey-EU component with regards to what might happen in early December, or what kind of a relationship that's now we are proceeding towards into the Q&A. So first and foremost, let's first focus. What are we looking at right now that is creating some of the problems that we are currently witnessing? And that's the discovery of natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean. That's the more or less the issue that's actually making this whole Turkey, EU, Turkey, Greece, Cyprus issue becoming much more complex than it already was to start with. And what is happening on the EastMed cannot be understood without looking into the larger geopolitical framework, something that Ioannis have already referred to, but also without looking into the ongoing clashes between different actors in the region. So the discovery of natural gas is the key issue. And then who are the actors involved in it? Now, EU, I don't think of the EU as an actor in the EastMed in the way that, we might think about the EU's role in different areas, let's say in Africa or in the Balkans. France is more of a visible actor within the EU on the Eastern Mediterranean issues. France, Greece, and Cyprus are now, they have been more or less, in tandem with one another, let's say, with regards to a support of the, some of the issues that Ioannis have raised with regards to the maritime zone between Turkey and Greece. And even though, at given periods of time, Turkey was close to accepting some of the Greek arguments. They've come to multiple times to the brink of resolving it. There is still the very pressing matter on how certain islands like Meis is right on the Turkish coast, and if they have a continental shelf, that means the large Anatolian landmass that Turkey has with the longest shore on the Mediterranean ends up with very little. So these are, issues that needs to be, of course, discussed in a much more, cool-headed manner. So France, Greece, and Cyprus, let's say, are, one group of actors, and they're all EU members. That brings the EU into the whole debate, of course. But not everybody in the European Union is on the same page with France, Greece, and Cyprus. And we've seen, for example, Angela Merkel's position very clear in terms of clear, clear is a relative term, of course, but relatively clear, let's say, where she was pushing more towards a creation of a dialogue and some kind of a conciliation. And not everybody in the European Union is equally interested in the EastMed for multiple reasons that I will come soon. Israel is an actor, Egypt is a clear actor, and so are, all the smaller players like Jordan or the Palestinian territories, which all, more or less came together within the Eastern Mediterranean Gas Forum, and in this, agreement that was more or less signed to set up it as a regional organization a couple of weeks ago. Now, Lebanon, Syria, and Turkey were not involved in the, they were not invited, and there is already a perception among the Eastern Mediterranean countries, let's say, that there are these blocks that have already formed for the exploration, extraction, and exploitation of natural gas. Unfortunately, if we talk with people who are in the business world or who are actually looking into natural gas, we might actually be creating a storm in a teacup, in the sense that that automatically brings this question: if there is this natural gas in the Eastern Mediterranean, how is it going to be extracted? Question number one. And who wants it? Who is the consumer? Who is going to buy this natural gas? Because at the very heart of the matter, what seems to lie is that all these actors can't agree how to share this resource. The maritime zone matters, or all these economic exclusive zones around Cyprus matter because they impinge on Turkish Cypriotic rights, like Ioannis have indicated, or with what Turkey thinks it's rightfully theirs in the Mediterranean as well. But it seems like that all the gas that could be extracted there could only be used regionally. Europe is not a consumer for it. So even if there is this pipeline project that Cyprus, Greece, and Israel have agreed to, that will go under the sea to the European destinations, First and foremost, it's very costly. It's going to cost something like $6.6 billion or 6 billion euros. And who's going to pay for it? It's completely uncertain. And what is more, environmental groups are already against this pipeline for its danger and impact that it will have on the Mediterranean seabed. And finally, what is going to be transported into this very costly, environmentally very problematic pipeline, everything that's going to pass through that pipeline, who needs it? Europe doesn't need it. Why does Europe not need it? Europe already has a Green Deal, and they are predicting, or they're projecting, let's say, or they're aiming for at least about 20 to 25% decline in the usage of these hydrocarbons. And the European Green Deal looks into a green economy or a green energy environment by 2050. Plus, Northern European countries, it's more or less the very same thing that happened with all these, Ukrainian, Russian gas problems. The European Union countries are divided among themselves with regards to their dependence on third parties, Russia, Ukraine, or Egypt, or Israel, if this natural gas thing in the East Mediterranean realizes. They differ with regards to their reliance on sources of natural gas. And if the Green Deal is more or less done, that dependence is going to decline even further. So that then brings me to a key concern that I have, which is that while we are struggling so much, and this is, a larger question for all of the actors around the Eastern Mediterranean, while we are, struggling and fighting with one another over whose resource are we talking about, and, what that resource is going to be talked or needed for, we are missing out the fact that we will be in the region the main consumers if that natural resource actually, is going to be exploited. So then why is this happening? That's actually a more interesting question for me. If it is very costly to extract it, if it is very costly to transport or use this natural gas, what is happening here? And what is at the very bottom of this new crisis in Turkey-EU relations, or in Greece-Turkey relations, or everything that involves Cyprus? And that again brings another related question: who benefits from this? Who is the main beneficiary from all this chaos, commotion, and division? Well, I have a clear answer. It's clear that Russia from behind the scenes is a great beneficiary. Now, this is not a conspiracy at all, of course, but Russia already have these now deals with Syria and Lebanon with regards to natural gas exploitation there, and to see all these other actors fighting with one another over a natural resource that nobody might actually have a usage for in the future. This division internally among the regional players benefits another player that's not in the region at all. So to make a long story short, I probably have more questions than answers, in the sense that what is happening in the EastMed right now, to a certain extent, is a current crisis that reached a proportion that actually is not more or less justified by the reasons underlying it. At the very same time, it's also very important, and that's something that Ioannis and I could discuss further. It brings forth questions of sovereignty, and sovereignty over over the agency, sovereignty over the Mediterranean, the Cyprus and the issues that relates all the how many years has it been? 60-year question over sovereign rights of the different communities in Cyprus, and without resolving or without at least having a common platform over sovereignty, I think we have, we are not going anywhere with these discussions. And this is not only related to Turkey, Greece, or Cyprus. What is happening in the EastMed is also a sovereignty issue between Lebanon and Israel. My 10 minutes is up. Or it's also a sovereignty issue with regards to, all the other countries that have a, coastline around the Mediterranean. So to sum up and to summarize, I think the EU now has probably a chance to formulate a much more coherent foreign policy action by presenting at least a unified front with regards to the EastMed. But I don't see this likely. I don't see this likely because France has become a player in the Mediterranean. France has become a player in Libya, struggling with Turkey over, what is happening there. So all of these are creating what I just called a perfect storm in a teacup. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Professor Müftüler-Baç. It was really, really inspiring. It also made me think about the issue from another perspective. I didn't know that the issue is not so much about dependence on energy resources as question mark, as you said, something maybe we can discuss in the Q&A. Thank you for your contribution. Now I am moving to Dr. Franza, who is going to add a layer by discussing the Eastern Mediterranean conflict from an economic perspective and maybe adding some questions for the Q&A. Dr. Franza, the floor is yours.
Sure. Thank you very much, Beste, and thank you so much for having me here today. I'd actually also like to build a little bit on the previous intervention. Economic interests are often discussed as a factor in this complex set of conflicts that is taking place in the East Mediterranean. And I'd really like to share some thoughts on energy in particular, which is my area of expertise, because I think it's really important to have a discussion on whether energy is indeed a blocker, a bone of contention in the conflict, or whether actually it could be an area where cooperation should and could move forward. And I think today's discussion should really focus on these. How can cooperation move forward? Well, gas prices have collapsed due to COVID-19, reaching lows of $2 to $3 per MMBTU. They have rebalanced since September, reaching $4.9 per MMBTU in Europe. But actually, EastMed gas would need prices of $7, $8, $9 to be economically viable. It has been partly highlighted also in the previous presentation. So that means essentially that in current gas market conditions, East Mediterranean projects are not economically viable. And I think it's important to realize that current market conditions are as they are, not just because of COVID. Prices had collapsed already before the pandemic outbreak due to the arrival of large amounts of LNG from Australia, from Russia, and particularly from the US, but also because of a slowdown in demand in Asia, where absorption capacity is limited by infrastructural bottlenecks and limitations to coal to gas switching. And actually, the bad news for the EastMed is that things are unlikely to change in the next years. The reason is that a lot of new LNG investment decisions have been made in 2019, when clearly nobody was expecting COVID-19. Those volumes will become available between 2023 and 2025. Thereby essentially closing that window of high prices that new project developers were hoping would open up in order to move ahead with new investment decisions. So I agree actually with the previous speaker that further monetization of East Mediterranean gas looks really, really difficult. I say further monetization because of course gas is already being successfully monetized in Israel and Egypt. We shouldn't forget that. What I disagree actually about is that precisely for this reason, gas is not a bone of contention. Everyone knows quite clearly that it's gonna be very difficult to further monetize it. So I think it's important to discuss what's in it for Turkey. You hear sometimes the argument that Turkey wants access to EastMed gas. Actually, Turkey doesn't need EastMed gas. Its gas demand has fallen for 3 years in a row since 2018, which coincidentally is the year where the controversial drilling activities by Turkey started. On the supply side, Turkey has access to LNG, which is not only a lot, but it's also very, very cheap. So it could actually just build more LNG terminals if it really wanted to diversify away from Russian gas, which it indeed receives in large quantities. And even this argument that Turkey wants to cut over-reliance on Russian energy is, in my opinion, weak, because Turkey is not hesitating to cooperate with Russia on nuclear energy, notably, and it has recently supported Turkstream. And last but not least, Turkey has recently found 400 BCM of gas in the Black Sea, which it could try to monetize. It's gonna be difficult, but it could try to monetize if it really wanted indigenous gas resources. So the next question, does Turkey simply want to disturb energy monetization by others because it feels isolated and cut off, considering what I said, that it doesn't really look for accessing gas. So if it can't access gas, does it want to make sure that others can't access it as well? This is already more plausible. But then the question is, can Turkey effectively disturb energy monetization in the region? And the answer is only to an extent. Turkish cannot block projects in Israel and Egypt. They are already underway quite successfully. It can complicate plans for an EastMed gas pipeline and for projects in Cyprus. However, as I said in my introduction, and also as the previous speaker highlighted, both the EastMed gas pipeline and Cypriot gas projects don't have great chances of success, regardless of Turkey's actions. So in my opinion, for Turkey, drilling for gas looks like a way to establish a principle that is broader. And this principle is that Turkey doesn't want to be cut off from access to the sea and its economic resources. So it's a broader geo-economic argument. And frankly, there I do have some sympathy and understanding for Turkey's arguments. And I think that this is precisely the area where the West, not only Europe, I would say the West, so the EU and the US, need to reassure Turkey. And the costs are quite low because, as I said, we are not really asking Cyprus or Greece to make great economic sacrifices, considering that probably they wouldn't get much out of the gas anyway. So how can concretely cooperation in energy take place? And I think this is also a good bridge towards the discussion. Something that has been discussed so far is the creation of an escrow account to share energy revenues between the two communities that live on the island of Cyprus. This proposal is, in my opinion, sensible. However, and perhaps the other speakers will confirm, speakers that are much more expert on the region than I am, this proposal is stuck and it's not going ahead for both economic and political reasons. Then there is LNG. LNG is abundant. It's less political than piped gas. It's cheap, as we've said. And it would allow Turkey to diversify away from Russia and to better negotiate its expiring contracts with Russia. The US is an important player there because of its large supplies. US LNG exports to Turkey have already been increasing, actually. But my point is that perhaps this could be supported further, maybe by building new regasification terminals in Turkey. The EU doesn't really seem to have a role there because the EIB has decided to divest actually from gas infrastructure. But the US already has a more interesting role. So all in all, the two things that I think have the largest potential to move ahead cooperation in energy are the extension of the EastMed Gas Forum to Turkey and renewable, or let's say low carbon energy. The EastMed Forum is something very divisive right now because it makes Turkey feel isolated. Turkey is not part of it. It's the only country that is not part of it, essentially. Turkish membership could be beneficial. I think the EastMed Gas Forum is interesting because it's actually the only multilateral organization, if you think about it, in a region where, you know, multilateralism, unfortunately, is not really being very, very successful. And it was very much the fruit of US pressure. We shouldn't underestimate this. And now that Biden is going to be president and the US will engage with the region even more, it could perhaps be revamped, but also revised and maybe made made into an EastMed energy forum. So going maybe beyond natural gas. And this brings me to the last point indeed, where I think the EU has a major role. The promotion of low carbon energy projects in the EastMed, including Turkey. So the EU could actually use the external dimension of the European Green Deal as a great framework to engage with Turkey on this, as well as EIB and EBRD funds. And I think that schemes could foresee both local use of energy, creating economic opportunities for Turkey, which, by the way, Turkey really needs, but also trade. This is particularly thanks to hydrogen that can be traded much more easily than electricity, creating new positive bonds of interdependence. So I think this energy dimension really needs to be added to the discussion, and energy can be an area where cooperation can move forward. And this actually brings me to link my intervention also to the previous ones in order to move ahead and have a productive debate. Because sometimes there is the suggestion that there should be an EastMed peace conference, right, to solve all of the region's problems. This is a very holistic approach. And I think it's interesting to discuss, you know, is this the best way of de-escalating conflict, or should we rather unpack the conflict and try to de-escalate it, as I think Ioannis was also suggesting, but he was mentioning Cyprus as the main epicenter of the conflict. And you know, try to de-escalate by unpacking all the issues and try to progress on every single issue rather than having this very holistic peace conference approach. Then I think something that emerged from the previous interventions is Turkish accession into the EU. The ambassador, for example, mentioned this as if it were still an option that is open, you know. And I think it's interesting actually to have a bit of a discussion on that. Reflecting upon what Laura said, what is the role of various European countries? So moving beyond the EU as such, but going into EU member states. You know, there's now this kind of division of labor, Germany, good cop, France, bad cop. You know, can we actually take advantage of these to move forward the process? I think it's also an interesting item for discussion. Are sanctions a good instrument or not really? Also an interesting thing to debate. And then another interesting question, I think, is what can Europe offer to Turkey? Custom union and other things have been put on the table. So these would be my main pointers for a debate. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dr. Franza, for your thoughts and questions. We have received a number of questions, but I want to apologize beforehand that we will not have time to answer all these questions. But there are very good questions coming, especially from our master students. So I would like to give the floor to these questions first. So one question is to Professor Müftüler-Baç by Melina Tasio-Vasilis. And Melina is asking, is the exploration of gas reserves in the East Mediterranean bound to create tensions, or could it be used to promote stability in the region? And maybe I will add another question. Maybe to all of you, but primarily to Dr. Grigoriadis, again from our student Aris Shukuroglu. And Aris is asking whether EU strategies and efforts in this conflict might change, given the newly announced peace talks in Cyprus, and also considering the newly elected president in the north side of Cyprus. So Professor Müftüler-Baç, would you like to take the floor?
Okay, thank you, Beste. I've actually read some of the questions that are in the chat, and I'll try to answer them as well. That's a very good question, because it rests on the assumption that if there is some kind of a possibility of cooperation on a resource like, you know, European coal and steel community, that could make, you know, peace and stability more likely. But as I said in my, you know, intervention, I don't think the Eastern Mediterranean gas is actually the actual issue. it's a power dynamic and this, geopolitical struggles for influence between various actors that brings natural gas forth as a key issue. So the role that France is playing, I don't think has anything to do with natural gas, but it's about a continuation of the French influence in the Eastern Mediterranean and, getting rid of Turkey, let's say, as a competitor in the region. Or similarly, what is happening between Egypt and Israel, it's all more or less related to the changes in Turkish foreign policy in the last couple of years, well, since 2009, the post-Arab Spring Egyptian and Turkish clashes that is now leading to that. So I totally agree with Dr. Franza's point in the sense that Turkey feels a sense of isolation in the region, and it's actually, reacting back to it with regards to its stance. So to make a very quick, answer to Melina's question and on other people's questions as well, I think we need to first recognize the, geopolitical dynamics, and then if a solution is possible, at least to the current crisis, some of the very, basic concerns that Turkey has with regards to its continental shelf, with regards to its, sovereign rights on the, Aegean and Mediterranean Sea have to be addressed. And without that, the, public opinion in Turkey is also changing very, very rapidly towards the European Union as well. I mean, it always had ups and downs. You've seen all these fluctuations over the years, but now it's seen as, it's more or less seen as a partner, and that actually ties back to some of the comments that Laura has made. It's no longer seen as a partner. There is a complete lack of trust on the, on the Turkish side about the European Union, and that's also to a certain extent unfounded because a lot of people perceive France more or less presenting the EU position, but the EU is much more complex than that. So I think we need to have a lot of, we need to have, and this is actually some of the questions in the chat, answers to these, we need to have new platforms of dialogue that goes beyond the former tools that we've been using. Somebody have suggested, I think your students from Amsterdam, the role that Italy might play, and I think that's, that's a good possibility. Or, as Dr. Franza has said, including Turkey into the Eastern Gas Mediterranean Forum, together with Lebanon and Syria as well, but as it doesn't seem likely at the moment. Or, to have more interlocutors in the region that are able to listen to all the parties, not only to, a few players.
Thank you, Professor. Dr. Grigoriadis, do you want to take the floor?
Yes, thank you very much. Regarding the question on the developments in Cyprus and how the European Union can help revitalize the peace process, I do think that time is working very fast against a negotiated peace solution in Cyprus, and we may end up in a situation whereby we may have a fast deterioration of the status quo with major security consequences for Cyprus and the European Union and the Eastern Mediterranean as well. And in that respect, I do think that the intervention of the European Union sooner or later is a wise choice, a wise decision. The elections in the north of Cyprus showed a very divided Turkish Cypriot community. So there were those who were the winner of the elections was the more nationalist, anti-federal candidate who supported closer relations with Turkey, and it was not Mustafa Ersin Tatar, not Mustafa Akıncı, who has been considered, and I think reasonably so, the most fervent proponent of a federal solution on the Cyprus issue on both sides of the island. So in that respect, this can be considered to be a negative step towards conflict resolution. But on the other hand, if we consider, and I think this is a valid point, that Turkey has a very strong influence on Turkish Cypriots. If Turkey decides to solve the Cyprus issue, I don't think that Tatar will be an issue and a major obstacle to conflict resolution there. So the discussion can still be made in a very effective and quick manner. I would like to add a couple of points on the issues raised. I do very much agree that the energy, like the real energy dividend is very questionable there. It's a very difficult case to make, how to monetize this energy. And of course, conflict makes it even more difficult. So it would be easier politically and financially to support a project if all the parties were involved and all the parties had a stake into this. But unfortunately, this discussion is again about sovereignty. So we're getting back into high politics. So it's about Greek sovereign rights or Turkish sovereign rights and islands and widths and continental shelves, exclusive economic zones. So the issue is no more about energy. Energy is like maybe the thin layer on the top of the real issue, which is sovereignty. So the issue is still important and serious, although the energy case is very, very, as Dr. Franza presentation stated in a very efficient manner. So in that respect, I do consider that Turkey's concerns and this idea of encirclement by the EastMed pipeline project, which however unrealistic it might be, is used to generate some sort of insecurity in the Turkish public opinion. This issue needs to be definitely addressed. But I think it's important to highlight that it's not only EU's or Greece's or Cyprus' fault. The reason the developments have been like this is because Turkey has had very bad relations with both Israel and Egypt for a completely different set of reasons. So I do think that Turkey's potential membership into the EastMed Gas Forum would be a way forward. But if Turkey is willing and ready to accept a common normative framework for this, and I think that's a key issue to be discussed in the following weeks. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Grigoriadis. There is a question to Ms. Batalla from Poland Turkmen, which is, in a theoretical scenario where Turkey has a new leadership with a new party that complies entirely with rule of law principles, the EastMed situation will still be a situation, and so will Cyprus. So I think her question is more about whether we can couple these questions under one framework and whether things would look differently under a different leadership. And then there are a couple of questions about the role of Italy, and maybe I can ask it first to Dr. Franza and maybe generally to the other speakers too. So one point made by Carlo Marino is that Italy is linked to the TIP from Azerbaijan, and relations with Turkey also seem to be fine. So what's the role of Italy and what kind of a role Italy can play, which is also a question by Sofia, who asks this question about a mediation that can be provided by Italy. So Ms. Batalla, do you want to react?
Yes, with pleasure. Thank you for the questions. I think she absolutely has a point here, and it's a very interesting aspect to bring into the discussion, the fact that on those considered to be national issues, the opposition doesn't have a different opinion. So we've seen this, how in the Turkish parliament, the intervention in Libya and other foreign policy aspects, Nagorno-Karabakh have been defended by other political parties as well in the Turkish parliament. So indeed, these questions would remain because they have been there. Actually, we shouldn't forget that all these new tensions in the EastMed are not new, actually, and we have been discussing about them for quite some time. And before that, there has been the Cyprus problem, and many problems remain unresolved. So this wouldn't change. It's not a matter of who is leading the country. Of course, there are certain issues when it comes to the backsliding in some democratic aspects that have, this current government, despite having done the most advanced reforms at the beginning of its tenure, even it was thanks to this government that Turkey actually got the candidate status to join the European Union. But now we see a different reality. But in any case, as I said, I think here, the EU could also have done more, actually, when it comes to the democratization of Turkey. But I would also like to maybe comment on some of the things that were brought up by the other speakers during the discussion. I absolutely agree that energy is only one issue of all the different aspects in which we are seeing a contest with Turkey at the moment. But indeed, there's need. I heard several of you and on the questions mentioning the need for more dialogue. Indeed, we need more institutional dialogue. The problem is that whenever we needed to engage more with Turkey, the response by the member states or the EU institutions has been to cut off all the different channels of communication. So, or the institutional ones, like the high-level dialogues that we had, or the other mechanisms in which we would come together with our Turkish counterparts to try to find solutions to our problems. And on this particular issue, that it's not mainly about energy, but other questions that pertain more to the geopolitical scenarios and the changing of a global order and regional one, especially during the last few years. I think I wish the ambassador Eichhorst would be with us to give us more information about this multilateral conference on the EastMed. I unfortunately don't have more details on that, but indeed it would be difficult to manage to establish it because of its own limitations about who will be participating, the scope, the timeline. We don't know much about that, but as it was previously said as well, I think Turkey deserves in a way to be heard, and it's the claims that it has on these questions need to be as well listened to, primarily through diplomatic channels, of course, but I think one fora like this or the other ones maybe more related to energy would be key, because Turkey has been seeing itself increasingly isolated in the region, and especially due to domestic developments at home, is now at odds with countries like Egypt and Israel, with whom had more normalized relation, and at the moment it's difficult to establish those relations with them. And we might see, I don't know how the new Biden administration will play into that. It was mentioned like a return into the region could be a game changer, but I attended yesterday a webinar in which Ioannis was also present and some other people, and someone said, well, we shouldn't have our expectations too high because the Biden administration has been in that government before and nothing has changed earlier. So we shouldn't put all our hopes in this upcoming presidency, because we might not see any changes in the region when it comes to the erratic policies that Trump has been implementing in the last 5 years.
Thank you, Ms. Batalla. There was indeed a question about the new US administration, and thank you for touching upon this issue too. So, Dr. Franza, may I invite you to reflect on the role of Italy?
Yeah, sure. It's a very good question, actually. We see that Italy is one of the EU countries that is really trying to talk to Turkey and to have cooperative relations, although, of course, Italy also has very close relations with Greece and Cyprus. Italy and Turkey actually conducted some joint military exercises in the summer. Italy also conducted, by the way, joint military exercises with Greece and France. There is close cooperation between Italy and Turkey also at intelligence, secret service level. Turkish intelligence had a key role in the liberation of Silvia Romano, a humanitarian aid worker that was kidnapped in East Africa. The role of the Turkish Secret Service was actually publicly recognized because images were broadcasted with Silvia Romano wearing a robe with the logo of the Turkish intelligence. Italy and Turkey, more importantly, also have a number of convergent interests in Libya, which is not something that we've been discussing a lot today. Turkey, as is known, supports the government of National Accord led by Serraj. Italy has a more neutral stance, but traditionally within the EU, it has tried to remind all of its EU partners, and particularly France, that the GNA is the officially recognized government in Libya. So at least there are no divergences between Italy and Turkey on Libya. So we do see an open dialogue between the two countries. So I do think that indeed, together with Germany, Italy has a key role of mediation in the region. And perhaps it has even more incentives than Germany to play a very strong role as a mediator in the region, simply because, of its geographical position. Italy is more exposed to the direct spillovers of instability in the region. And also when it comes to energy, Italy through ENI has very strong stakes in the EastMed, much more than Germany.
Thank you, Dr. Franza. I would like to also ask our other speakers if they want to reflect on the role of Italy or some other issues that have been raised by speakers and the questions. Professor Müftüler-Baç, do you have anything to add?
No, but yeah, I actually agree a lot with the fact that, we can, it's not only that Italy could play a role in the EastMed, but also in resolving some of the conflicts of interest, let's say, between France and Turkey, perhaps to a certain extent in Libya as well. And one of the things that might actually be possible to see is, since I haven't talked a lot about the EU process, and I see some of the questions in the chat there as well, I think we need to be very frank on multiple fronts. And the first one is, it's something that Laura already referred to a certain extent. I really don't think membership is on the table anymore. So the, quicker we actually acknowledge this, the higher the possibility that we could actually find alternative tools to take the relationship to a different type of an integration. And it's not, in its essence, it's not actually something negative in the sense that the EU is already developing different types of integration projects with other countries. So, but there is no talk on this precisely because membership is still the main framework within which we construct our main dialogue. On top of that, I also would like to point out one final point. It's not a question that's been asked, but you need to ask yourself, especially the younger students, what is it that made the European Union lose its transformative power, its conditionality, its credibility in the Turkish context? And that is a lot to do, since already a number of speakers and some of the questions relate to human rights and rule of law. It's also to do with what is happening in the European Union itself as well. So if you're looking at, what the EU is doing from the Turkey component, then you see two member states, and you know what I'm talking about, Poland and Hungary, who has become members and who are backsliding on multiple levels and who are basically, paralyzing the European Union now. The ability of the European Union to point out, not only to Turkey, to Bosnia, to Serbia, to Macedonia, and then to present them with these sets of conditions and ask them, okay, you have to meet the political criteria or else you cannot be a member, but then you already have two guys who are, openly violating all of these rules, lessens the European Union's credibility in the eyes of the third parties. So, part of the reason why, if we can ask a question, how is Turkey lost? Because I think to a certain extent that still is a valid question. A lot of that responsibility lies on the European shoulders as well, for multiple reasons.
Thank you, Professor Müftüler-Baç. Dr. Grigoriadis, do you want to also speak a bit on the
let me make a couple of final points. Regarding the role of Italy, I do think, of course, that Italy could play a constructive role in this. And let me raise that Italy and Greece recently signed agreement on the delimitation of their exclusive economic zones, which is exactly what we're hoping in the case of Greece, Turkey, and Cyprus as well. And I think it's important to highlight the footnotes of this agreement. Both sides agreed on principle to apply the United Nations Convention on the Law of the Sea. But if you see into the details, Greece showed some flexibility in cases of some very small and uninhabited islands. So in a sense, that could be a blueprint maybe for the future in the Eastern Mediterranean. So, and a final point on the EU-Turkey relations and what's coming ahead. I think it's very important to state the significance of the domestic Turkish political developments. It's an issue, of course, that goes beyond the scope of our discussion here. But to the extent that foreign policy in Turkey has been increasingly influenced by domestic political development, and to the extent that Turkish foreign policy has become a subject of domestic political debate, and it might even be considered as a refuge for the government because the government fails to address fundamental domestic political issues. So it tries to garner support and consolidate its voter base through foreign policy issues. We need to look closely what's happened in the last days on Turkish government alliance and sort of all these power dynamics and struggles that may have a very important impact on its relationship with the European Union in the coming days and weeks.
Yes, thank you, Dr. Grigoriadis. And I have now received a message from the organizers that Ambassador Eichhorst is, her team is sending replies to the questions that you have asked. You can follow the chat box to see the detailed answers. So we do not have much time, but maybe I can invite all of you for some final words, or I can bring up another question. What would be your preference? Then maybe I can ask a question by Nilgün Arısan from TEPAV, if I'm not mistaken. And she asks, what do you think about the organization of the so-called multilateral conference on the Eastern Mediterranean? Would it be feasible as quotations starting modalities such as participation, scope, and timeline will need to be agreed with all the involved parties, as stated in the presidency conclusions of the EU summit on the 1st of October?
It will be as effective as the Barcelona process. Okay, you get the gist. Okay, so everything the EU has done in the EUMED area, having a, this last suggestion from the EU on having this conference, it will be just a meeting. That's my opinion, of course. I don't know, maybe you guys have a different,
if I may, I intervene into this. I think it also depends a lot on how Turkey's domestic politics develop and whether the government in Turkey feels that it needs a stronger support by the European Union. And this, of course, is linked to the state of Turkish economy, because this has been the key issue in recent weeks and months in Turkey, of course. So,
had you concluded? Oh, okay. No, I just wanted to add, I think it could be a little premature to have this grand bargain approach. And as I signaled, I think my suggestion would be more in the direction of try to unpack the conflict as much as possible and progress in single dossiers and de-escalate those. I don't really see a grand bargain succeeding nowadays. At the current stage of disagreements. But of course, I might be wrong. And we learn more from the Council.
Thank you, Dr. Franza. Ms. Batalla, do you have anything to add?
Yeah, maybe I could on the wider EU-Turkey relations. I think here no one really knows what's the way forward, to be honest. And I think what Meltem was saying, I think she's right in a way. We all know that the accession framework, is there, but it's not serving any purpose at the moment. But I think the consequences of unplugging it would be more devastating than having it there. And maybe now, with all these tensions going on, might not be the right time to just, it's been already for 2 years ongoing, this debate on what would be the alternative to it. And so far, no one has come with a solution that can work for all. I agree that we should be looking into its dossiers. The problem is that we have so many dossiers on Turkey on the table that it becomes overwhelming sometimes. And at the same time, they are really clearly interrelated. That's the problem. I mean, we cannot, people say now, well, let's look at the customs union as a way to find an alternative normative framework. Well, I mean, as I said earlier, the progress on this file has been blocked in the Parliament and the Council for years now. So it's not realistic to talk about upgrading the customs union when France is calling to suspend the original agreement. So that's the problem. I think if we would see a sign, I think it would become more difficult to say to Turkey, well, you're not complying with anything, if we would see any goodwill signs coming from Turkey. There, we would put those who really never wanted to see Turkey in the European Union against the wall, because that's a reality. There's no political will. I mean, there are certain member states that would never, even if Turkey would become the most democratic country of the European Union, would never let Turkey in. And that's a problem. We all know that. No one says it out loud. It's very difficult to come clean and say it and just, to stop the process forever. But at the same time, it would help, to really see some good signs coming from the other side on the reform agenda that was announced recently, or the judicial package. This would really prove those wrong, and we would have, for those who are friends of Turkey, I mean, arguments to continue fighting or supporting this long-term relationship.
Thank you, Ms. Batalla. So we have reached the end of our time. I would like to thank you a lot for this very, very interesting discussion. I have learned a lot from all of you. Thank you for your generous interventions and contributions. I would like to thank the audience for the great questions. The answers from Ambassador Eichhorst is still coming, and maybe we can stay online for a while so that you can see the answers. And with this, I would like to conclude our webinar, and with an announcement that, this event is organized by the Jean Monnet Network, EUMENIA, and if you would like to follow us on social media, Twitter and Facebook are where we post our announcement. There are a number of events coming up, and in fact, this event is the first event of the practitioner series that Dr. Dimitris Bouris is organizing at the University of Amsterdam for, if I'm not mistaken, for 4 years, in which we try to bring academics and policy and decision makers together. And we have more events to come in November and December, so follow us on social media. I would like to thank you again and wish you a great afternoon, and hope to see you in another event of ours. Thank you.